Mr. Warren Beech and Co. Good to see you, sir. A lot to talk about here at the Sustainability Breakfast. What is a big talking point? What do you advise your clients around that topic?
Probably the most important thing with regard to water and the water use license is apply for it as far ahead as possible and make sure that you cover all of the water uses. Delays in getting the water use license, even with commitments from government, do delay mining projects from going ahead.
And talking about delays, 300 plus days to get your license, how can we streamline that to increase the investment therein?
It's making sure that the application is put together properly. A lot of the applications that go in are not done properly. The pre-work is not done. They don't look good, they don't feel good, and then they don't go through the system as quickly as they should.
And do you think government's doing all they can to make that process as streamlined as possible?
There's been a significant commitment from government, and we've seen it in action, yes.
And you've been talking a bit of doom and gloom in the industry 2015. Your articles are a bit of a horror story sometime. On a knife edge, where are we going 2016?
2016 certainly doesn't seem to be starting off that well, and it doesn't look as if it's going to get better in the medium term. It's a combination. It's not just the commodity prices, the downturn in commodity prices. The whole industry has been quite badly hit with the health and safety aspects this year. A number of high-profile events, and obviously, as a result of that, there's significant governmental attention on mining again. So not a good start, and doesn't look as if 2016 is going to be a good year. People are talking about 2017 being the year of recovery, but certainly not until then.
Would you say these are natural fluctuations that any industry would be going through?
The mining industry has been going through fluctuations, and if you look at it over a long term, then it's possible to say it's a natural cycle. But it isn't. There's a lot more to it this time round. And I don't believe that the challenges that the mining industry is currently facing have been faced in the past. They're new challenges, and they're biting deeper this time round.
Absolutely. And you're talking about a big case coming through in the next week or so. Would you like to elaborate on that and what that means for the industry?
Perfect. So we acted for a big mining house in a review application in the Labour Court in relation to an administrative fine that was issued to that company by the Department of Mineral Resources. The judgment was handed down on the 3rd of February this year and went into quite a bit of detail in the powers of inspectors, including the principal inspectors of mines in the different regions, and particularly what they can and cannot do. And in this regard, looking at a principal inspector acting both as the prosecutor and as the judge when it comes to making certain decisions. We were successful in overturning the decision of the principal inspector on that basis where he had or she had acted as both the prosecutor and the judge. So that was a great principle to come out. Taking into account it could affect various different decisions that are made, not just the imposition of an administrative fine. We might even look at Section 54 instructions and how that's taken forward, so giving a lot of guidance there.
Presumably a game changer for the industry then on some level.
It is. Gives a lot of guidance firstly to the mining houses. So can we challenge these decisions? And I think the answer is yes, when there's grounds to do so. And from to the department as well, to say, you need to be structured in how you make these decisions.
In terms of the legal framework in South Africa, are we too legally heavy, or is it what is necessary for a sustainable industry?
The South African industry is highly regulated. I mean, we have a broad range of legislation which applies to it, and because of that, it appears legalistically inclined. It looks top-heavy, to put it differently, and the framework is there, and really it's our job to work around it. It's there, it's not going to go away. The department and the minister has commented again on Friday that they're going to focus on the regulations, focus on enforcing them, so they're there. It's a reality and we need to work around.
And Mining Charter 3 looks like a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, or some of the points come up there.
It's possible. I mean, Mining Charter 3 has been very controversial. From the minister's comments, and probably we'll be hearing more about that today, it does look as if there's some light at the end of the tunnel and that there might be some pragmatic solution to Mining Charter 3, and I think we need it. The minister was very specific on the use it or lose it principle, but has been quiet on the once empowered, always empowered principle, and that's what I really think people are waiting to hear about.
And the big buzzword last year was beneficiation. How can we balance that between profitability and beneficiation?
Yeah, beneficiation is obviously quite important. It's part of the life cycle, and it's probably another area where we can look at to save jobs. Beneficiation can provide another avenue in saving jobs, same as rehabilitation, accelerated rehabilitation. It's another job-saving avenue, and I think it needs to be looked at very seriously.
And good to see agriculture being brought into the equation as a possible precursor to mine closures. How realistic is that to get communities involved in other areas?
It is important, and it's part of the process. It's part of the community. It's part of the mine closure process, and the communities are critical to that. It's an opportunity, and we need to take it.
Absolutely. And doing business in Africa, where do you see the key growth points going forward?
The immediate, and Nick can comment as well because he's fairly busy there at the moment. Probably for us, sub-Saharan Africa is hotting up again, and that's really where the immediate opportunities are from a South African point of view. Remain sub-Saharan Africa. Key points: Namibia, Zimbabwe. Very, very important area that over the next year or two is going to, I think, present good opportunities again.
Commodity prices, where we're headed?
At the moment, everything's going south. I think gold's recovered a bit on Friday. They went down again today by about $10. So huge fluctuations, but I think that they're going to stay depressed. Certainly seems as if they're going to stay depressed for a while. The biggest ones being hit, obviously, iron ore. We can see the impact that that's having. They're at 10-year lows, and many of the mines have been set up at levels which they're not getting at the moment, and that's really what's impacting on the industry. Chrome seems to be there, jumps back, but gold at the moment seems to be the most stable, even though it is fluctuating.
The old favourite. And you're talking about the appeal process, suspension of the suspension therein. How can we avoid some of these sort of delays, so to speak?
The key issue with the appeals in relation to water use licenses, that as soon as the appeal is lodged, the water use license is suspended. If that is suspended, it effectively sterilises your ability to mine. And regardless of what else you've got, you can have your mining rights, you can have all your environmental authorizations. You can't mine without being infringing on the water use license. So that is a major issue, and the key thing there from our perspective is to work with the potential objectors, get to know them as part of your process before you apply, and get them on your side. You need to try and avoid the objection and the appeal in the first place.
And 2015, relatively stable labour conditions. Can we expect more of that in 2016?
No, it's unfortunately not. It's not. The signs are not good already. Lonmin is in wage negotiations, and they're expecting another torrid time with AMCLU. Most of the wage negotiations are starting, are in process, not looking good at all, and it's unlikely to be a stable environment for the first 6 months of this year.
The whole industry shrank by what, 10-15% in the last few years. How can we stop the rot of the shrinkage, so to speak?
We're not going to stop the shrinkage in the short term at all. The numbers that are being spoken about is another 30 to 40,000 people that are potentially in the net of retrenchments, possibly in the first 6 months of this year. And the only way to stop that shrinkage is to actually look for alternative work sources like beneficiation, like accelerated rehabilitation. It's the only way to save jobs at the moment.
Mechanisation, another big turning point. How can we sustainably mechanise with obviously a lot of people losing their jobs in the process?
Mechanisation or automation generally has a job loss consequence, but it has its benefits. In other words, it can sustain the mines longer. The biggest issue at the moment is the mines that are being placed on care and maintenance and or closing, and as a result of that, the jobs are going. Mechanisation can prolong the life of mine and ultimately preserve jobs, not all the jobs, but it can lead to preserving some of those jobs.
A lot of talk about investment when companies are investing in new areas, how much is too much and how much is too little, so you don't have a big hole when you leave.
Very, very difficult not to have a big hole when you leave. It's a number of the mine closures have resulted in communities which have, and mentioned earlier in the breakfast, you generally try and leave the hospitals, the schools, the generators, but it doesn't work. So you leave the generators to create the electricity, but the mechanics who fix those generators leave. So it's a complete transfer of skills process that is required, and that is probably the most critical thing. The hole's going to be there, but what is necessary is sustaining that community, creating a sustainable community, and it's training, bringing people up to speed on how to do basic things like keep a generator on biofuels, creating the biofuels, etc. So it's a long-term project.
Are you seeing a greater awareness for mining companies for the environment and also energy efficiency?
Yes, absolutely. Whether it's because of altruistic reasons or because it's cost-cutting, alternative energy is a necessity. It's stability of source, it's cost-effectiveness, so very strong focus on that, and most mines are looking at some form of alternative energy.
And presumably on-site generation, rooftop solar, the whole works?
Yes. Solar is obviously very difficult, particularly if you're using the battery system. Given the mines, the deep mines, it's not the most viable source of alternative energy, so they're looking at bigger projects. It's wind, solar, it's usually a combination, but a lot of the mines are looking at those projects.
And energy supply 2016, presumably a lot of money lost in 2015. Are we going to see a more stable supply chain?
The theory is that 2016 should see a more stable supply chain, with contracts with the coal suppliers being put in place, security of supply, and then there's been a lot of work on the grid, and that is probably going to have benefits, and we'll probably see those benefits in 2016, yes.
And finally, impressions for the Indaba, key talking points we should look out for?
Jobs, jobs and jobs. That really is the heart of what this is all about now. This is meant to be an investment conference, but it really is a platform to talk about protecting, saving and creating jobs. And I think that's going to be the key talking point in most of the discussions through this Indaba.
Tax? Any further increases on the horizon?
Always very, very difficult. I think that it's inevitable that the discussion is going to take place, and I think it's inevitable that there will be some adjustments. The money's got to come from somewhere, and whether it's from the fees, varsity fees situation, and where those must come from to infrastructure, it's got to come from somewhere, and I think it will be looked at, and probably a direct tax and indirect taxes through tolls, etc. So it's probably going to be a year that we're going to be talking a lot about where and how to increase the tax base.
Do you see the relationship between government and business improving, almost like a marriage? It's had its ups and downs, but it's sort of getting on the same page in more recent times.
It is with certain departments within government. If you look at Home Affairs now and they're looking at relaxing the unabridged birth certificate requirements, because there's a reality. It's had a deep impact on tourism. So that marriage now they've got to the situation where it needs to be looked at. From a mining perspective, Minister Zwane has been very, very open to government, other government departments and to business. And that certainly seems to be helping, and it seems to be a good period of the marriage with the Department of Mineral Resources at the moment.
A bit of a squabble in the coal industry. Where do you see the resolution in that regard?
Coal is interesting because it's a strategic mineral. It's perceived to be a strategic mineral. The concern is that too much is still being exported. The rubbish is being mined and sent to Eskom. Again, another talking point this year, most definitely a talking point. And in the last year or two, it's always been a focus on how to keep as much coal in South Africa as possible and not export it. But it's a very tricky balance, because that's what pays for the extraction of the rest of the coal. And that again is going to be a strong talking point this year. Whether it's going to be resolved or not, who knows, but coal mines, I don't believe the DMR is going to allow coal mines to be put on care and maintenance. They need those mines running, and if a mine can't keep it up and running, a current owner, there's going to be an incentive to move it along to another owner that is prepared to mine it.
Are we really going away from a coal-based energy economy, or is that more lip service?
It's not something which is realistic and practical at the moment. South Africa is still heavily reliant on the coal mining industry, and the UK announced that they're going to phase it out. We can't do that yet, not for another 30 or 40 years. Coal is still our primary source of energy. It's unlikely to be replaced in the short term. In other words, 20 to 30 years, possibly as long as 40 years.
The Waterberg seems to be all the talk of all the time, doing rather well up there.
The Waterberg is doing very well, and it's an an explosion of development up in the Waterberg. It is realistically the only good source of coal that we've got left in this country. Mpumalanga coal fields, reducing quality, reducing quantities, Waterberg is the realistic option, and it needs to be developed. A bit slow possibly on the infrastructure side, but it is getting there.
And people looking to invest in mining, foreign investment, which key sectors would you advise them to look at?
Short to medium term, coal remains a good investment. Still a strategic mineral, so that makes sense. If you look at the gold prices, it seems to be a good investment at the moment. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got chrome, platinum and manganese that are really at the bottom, so not great investments at the moment, but there are still a number of people, because of supply chain continuity, so a lot of the traders are now looking at supply chain continuity by buying the mines. So looking forward 8 to 10 years, they're looking at the manganese, chrome and PGM operations to secure supply. So there is activity there and there's investment for different reasons.
And finally, we've got a lot of good young lawyers coming through the ranks in the country. What do you put that down to, our strong legal framework in this country?
There are some very good, and Nick's one of those lawyers. He's just been made a partner. Mining's in his blood, so we've got practitioners coming through, and usually it's whenever I speak to people, young practitioners, the bottom line is find a passion. You need to be passionate about it, and whether it's health and safety, environmental, or the mining industry as a whole, find your passion and stick with it. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing. You have to be passionate about anything you do, and that's what we try and get through to our young practitioners.
It's becoming a more sexy industry to be involved in as well.
Well, I don't know if it's a sexy industry to be involved in. It's not the moving and shaking Wolf of Wall Street scenario, but it is. It's still a very good industry. It's perceived to have good long, lifespan. People can be in it for a long time. There's a perception that you can make money in it. There's a perception that you have a good lifestyle. Not necessarily true, but those perceptions create a demand for lawyers coming in.
You're still driving the 911?
No.
What do you got this year?
Cayman S.
Oh, shit. Thanks for your time, sir. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.